Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tricast experience. Thank you so much for joining us. And today, on today's episode, we are going to talk about how to build a brand, a personal brand, in 10 minutes. I'm your host, Rob TD, and this is creative director
Will Higley.
And we are really excited for today's episode. Let's get to it.
Let's go.
Awesome. So the first thing we're going to talk about is first things first. If you want to build a personal brand, you first have to kind of isolate yourself within the market somewhere. So we're going to call that picking your niche.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, the key to picking your niche is that it has to be authentic to who you are. It needs to be practical, and it definitely helps if you have experience in that industry.
Of course.
So me, in my personal history, I know absolutely nothing about cars at all. Right? So if I was going to build my personal brand on Lamborghinis, right, that wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be authentic. I would have no experience. I would have no expertise at all.
And you don't have a Lamborghini.
And I don't have a Lamborghini.
That
so
too.
like 4 out of 4, I lose. I should not be building that personal brand.
Yeah.
But let's look at you. On the other hand, you have a lot of experience building video productions, editing, videography, travel cinematography, right? So it really makes sense for that to be your personal brand.
That's the niche that I'm in, and I have a lot of experience there. So yeah, it does.
Definitely. Once you figure out what your niche is, then it really depends on, based on what personal brand you're trying to make, what platforms do you prioritize? So for you, why did you choose YouTube over Facebook when you were building your brand?
So the reason that I chose YouTube is because I saw a lot of the examples of the work that I wanted to do on YouTube already, getting great traction, which means kind of in that little bit of market research, I found that YouTube would be the place for me because that's where other people doing the same thing are.
No, that's 100% the move. Before you pick where you want to be, it really makes sense to kind of know where your ecosystem exists, right? So let's talk about which platform and why. So I kind of think that a lot of people who leverage their personality in text format really belong on Twitter, whereas people who really use the aesthetic kind of quality of images to leverage their brand, that really makes sense for Instagram.
Absolutely. And I think that goes to how you're curating your content as well, right? So, if we look at my Instagram, for example, shameless plug, there is the whole big collage of posts, That's not something that I can do on relatively any other platform because it's simply not set up that way.
Definitely.
So I took Instagram and took advantage of it to go and create what I did.
Yeah, 100%. And I would also, we look at why it makes sense. Instagram's entire platform is built around kind of showing the visual aspects of brands and profiles.
Absolutely.
The next piece of building your brand is creating content. I would say this is probably the most important piece of any brand, is what kind of value you are bringing to your audience.
Absolutely. So kind of going into that, how do we pick what content we're going to put out?
Well, first I want to say that almost any content is good content because so many people kind of get tripped up in the first step of actually kind of actualizing their goal here.
Yeah.
Right? So once you're actually making moves and taking like even small selfie content, then you can build into the actual production space of creating bigger and bigger pieces.
Okay.
So let's use an example. Will, for your personal brand, Will Higley Productions, who's your ideal target market, which is the next step?
So my ideal target market is kind of people and, mainly the younger generation that's inspired by travel and entrepreneurship and cool things, whether that be, people that are inspired by cool stuff, but is also like down to earth, So in a way of like, I'm not going and driving around in Lamborghinis and stuff like that, and everybody wants to go and see that, but rather I'm traveling for cheap in Europe or stuff that's a little bit more graspable for people to latch on to.
As well as I think that creates a really awesome avenue to the next kind of third piece within creating content, is that it needs to be engaging.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right? If you make things that are just so kind of blatant and monotone, no one's going to want to actually engage. And there you have no discovery metrics that kind of come into play because no one's wanting to share, right? And then your audience doesn't grow.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit of content strategy here, right? So there's the argument that if you're on, let's say, Instagram, and all of my examples and arguments come from Instagram because that's where I am. But there's the argument that you should be posting 6 times a day.
Yeah.
There's the argument that you should be posting
on every platform
once a week. There's the argument that you should be, what are your views on that?
So my big goal is omni strategy, right? So I'm a big believer in doing everything you possibly can to grow your brand, but to scale down both for authenticity and practicality. But the biggest thing that I want to emphasize is whenever you are creating content, the goal should be to create value for your audience.
Okay.
So there's a lot of regular practices within the community today where people actually pull back and hide a lot of their best content behind conversion gateways. And this severely limits how much that your audience will be able to grow, because no one really wants to share the vanilla content, right, that you're giving away for free. When you're actually giving away your best stuff for free, as much as you can, then you actually build the trust of your audience.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I like how you said that. So moving on, our last thing is
to monetize, right? So once you've built your personal brand, it's now kind of the goal to what do you want to do with that, right? And too quickly do people build their brands just to monetize, and that can't be the game, because that's going to trip you up in the beginning.
Yeah.
So once you do grow your brand by providing that free entertainment, humor, or informative value, then we can talk about how are you going to then leverage the attention that you have in order to then grow a business around that. An important piece of that is making sure that your kind of avenue for monetization is adjacent to the industry that you've been building your brand in.
Okay.
So if I created a TV show for mechanics, I own a mechanic shop, and we're creating content within it of the antics of what goes on day to day, right? And if I built a personal brand as Dan the Mechanic, right, it wouldn't make sense for me to then go and try to leverage my personal brand as well as sell garden hoses at the same time, because those brands aren't just associated with each other at all. But what I could do is develop a ebook or a masterclass about how to learn how to do, your own oil change, or how to change your windshield wipers. Those kinds of easy fixes.
Yeah.
That makes sense for you to be in that space.
That's really interesting. And that's a totally great idea. If you own a mechanic shop, do that.
Seriously.
Now. So kind of wrapping up, all of these different pieces are really kind of like the stepping stones that you'll walk down in order to start creating and building your personal brand. So kind of just to recap, let's go through the steps one more time real quick.
So pick a niche. Make sure it's authentic, practical, and bonus points if you have experience in it. Pick your platform, and arguably one that makes sense for the niche you're in. And then create massive amounts of content. Once you've become an opinion leader in your industry, then think about monetization in something that's adjacent to the niche market that you're in.
And where would you go from there? Building in the future?
So then it's kind of matching your ambition to what you want to do. What we're doing at Triangle Company is that we're building a machine to build other tiny little baby machines underneath it. We're going to build Triangle Company to then grow our own personal brands and small businesses underneath us.
Great. I love it. I love it. So thank you guys so much for tuning into the Tricast experience. This has been Build a Brand in 10-ish minutes.
Thanks so much. Click like, subscribe, follow, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, inquiries, DM us. We'd love to talk to you.
Sweet.
See ya.